Hello, everybody. It's episode 15th of Grizzlies Worldwide. And tonight we are back to our hometown, Memphis. And from Memphis, we got it with us on this episode, Chipulins. Chipulins, how are you doing tonight?
Man, I'm doing great. I really appreciate you having me on.
No, yeah, it's an honor to have you here. I'm the one to thank you to have you here. Uh, Did you watch the game tonight? For you, it was this afternoon. It was tonight for me, but this afternoon, did
Yeah,
you watch the game?
yeah, I sure
So,
did. I sure did. It was honestly a really good competitive summer league game. Sometimes the summer league games, the basketball's not very good, or one team is clearly better than the other. But this was two pretty evenly matched teams, and you could tell they both wanted to win. So yeah, it was a great game. I had a ton of fun watching it.
have you? Yeah, yeah, for sure. And because at the start, it seemed like we were like getting an edge on it, and it kind of balanced on the third period. I think, yeah, on the second and third period, it seemed the Clippers were getting an edge. Then we kind of, yeah, we won for one. But yeah, I agree with you. It's what was really like a really competitive game. Have you been watching the summer league games, or at least most of them?
Yeah, yeah. To be honest with you, summer league is one of my favorite things that the NBA does.
It is.
Y- yeah, yeah. I've not only been, a Grizzlies fan since they came here to Memphis, but I've always been very interested in the NBA draft and, kind of the development of young players and trying to pick out, players that are going to be good and stick in the league long term. So,
Mm-hmm.
you watch these guys, whether it's in college here in America or wherever they were playing in their pro league, in Europe or overseas somewhere, and just to see them, all playing together with their NBA teams against one another. I've always found it a ton of fun to watch. I know it's not everybody's favorite, but I love the summer league. So I've watched every Grizzlies game, and I don't know, probably watched eight or nine more of just random teams playing against each other.
Yeah. How that's curious. How did you get interested in analyzing? I'm sorry, like young players, draft players, scouting players. How did you get interested in that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I played basketball growing up, and I was never a great player. I played in high school, and
Mm-hmm.
was mostly a bench player. But I've always loved the game, and I think when you're growing up and you see some of these guys who are really good in college, and then for whatever reason they don't end up making it in the NBA, I think it just kind of sparked my curiosity as a player. Kind of the player at heart, I guess. And so, the Grizzlies. I don't know how long you've been following the team, but if you'll remember back to the Chris Wallace days, they really struggled drafting players when he was the general manager. He did a lot of good
Mm-hmm.
things, and he was good at putting together the core four, and he made some smart free agent signings, but just really had a hard time drafting players. So that just kind of interested me because, I mean, to be totally honest with you, I thought I could do just as good a job or even better job at drafting players than the Grizzlies could in those days. And, I think we're fortunate now because the Grizzlies being a smaller team, we're not in a big market. We're not someplace that a bunch of free agents are going to want to come to.
Yeah.
They have to build the team through the draft. And, ever since Robert Parra came in and bought the team, and still Zach Kleinman is the general manager, they've done a terrific job, probably as good as anybody in the NBA at drafting guys. So the fact that they've been so good at it has only really made me even more interested in trying to see why they've had success and just things like that. I think just in general, I like basketball and love watching it at all levels. So, being able to watch it through the draft, you get to see them, kind of late high school all the way through college, and then getting into the NBA and just trying to figure out what the science is behind that, if there is such a thing.
Do you think there is?
No, I don't. I think that there are certain things that will tell you if a player is going to be able to play in the NBA. But then,
Uh-huh.
you think about it, once they get to the league, there's so much stuff that you can't control, right? Like, how much is an organization going to invest in one player? Are they does a player have 3 or 4 head coaches really early on in his career? Are they investing in his development? Are they putting him in positions to succeed? Like, there are so many variables that determine whether a player is good or not in the NBA. But I think just kind of studying the way the Grizzlies have drafted, there's definitely a few, statistical indicators that you can look at, or different things on film that kind of suggest, okay, this guy is worth picking high because he does a lot of stuff that other guys who have had success in the NBA do. So, but no, I wish there was an easy science to it. If there was, me and you probably wouldn't be talking. Hopefully, I'd be working for an NBA team.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah. It just remind me of a question that I made the other day. Another guest. When you're like studying a player, do you rely more on statistics or on film or on both?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's both is the answer. I think that first, when I was growing up, I think it was mostly film, right?
Yeah.
Just does a player pass my eye test? Does he look like an NBA player? But recently there's been such an explosion in analytics and publicly available analytics that you can get access to fairly easily. So I think you have to use both, right? You want the analytics, you want a guy to be able to hit certain thresholds in his stats, but then does what you're watching on film back up what those stats are saying? So, in my opinion, you have to use both.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. It was kind of the same answer I got the other time I asked this question. You got to like to the stats need to back up what you're watching on film. That's what you said, right?
Right.
Yeah. So okay, but sticking for now with the summer league, what's your overall opinion on the Grizzlies game so far? And
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
one left.
yeah, they've been great, man. I think what's interesting is this front office has always been able to put a very good and competitive summer league team out there, despite really not always having very high draft picks. This year they have Zach Edey, who was the ninth pick, but he's only played one full game and then 8 minutes of another game. So they're doing this with guys that either didn't get drafted or were drafted in the second round.
Mm-hmm.
Jake LaRavia is their only first round pick who's played multiple games, and he hasn't played a ton because he has a little knock or something like that that's keeping him out. So I think you look at like some of the opportunity for Scottie Pippen Jr., G.G. Jackson, Jalen Wells. These guys have been great. Even Trey Jamison has looked good at times. Obviously,
Uh-huh.
Cam Spencer's been good before he had his injury. But it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. When you're a small market team, you have to be able to draft well and to hit on undrafted free agents. And I just don't know if there's a better team than the Grizzlies doing that right now. And they're going to be able to go play for a summer league championship on Monday, which take that for whatever it's worth, right? Some people think the
Yeah.
summer league doesn't matter at all, and doesn't matter, right? But clearly it matters to the Grizzlies, and they put out a competitive team despite not having a bunch of really high draft picks, guys who were drafted in the first round or anything like that. So I've had a ton of fun watching them, and I think it's a really good kind of view at the way they're trying to build their basketball team. You look at the way they play, just high pressure defense, a lot of turnovers, attacking the rim, shooting threes. It's good basketball, man. It's fun to watch, and like I said, I think it kind of gives you a glimpse of what they're trying to build, overall as a franchise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to ask you to address this because I've noticed that the defense has been really turned on all over the summer league,
Yeah,
forcing like a lot of turnovers on other teams.
yeah, it's been incredibly impressive to watch, right? Like it starts with Scottie Pippen Jr. He's been so
Mm-hmm.
good. Guarding the other team's point guard. I mean, there's multiple times every game where he'll guard them throughout the length of the court. And there's so many times he's poking the ball away, getting a steal, creating an easy transition bucket. Even a guy that I had heard of but wasn't super familiar with, Isaiah Miller, who's been Scotty's backup, he's done the same thing. He's generating a ton of deflections and steals. Dejan Giroux, who's played a little bit for the Grizzlies last year, he's been with the Hustle. Same thing with him. And I've been really impressed with GG Jackson's defense too. I think you know the few times that we've kind of gotten to hear him interviewed at summer league, he's always talked about how Jason March, the summer league coach, is challenging him to do that stuff because I think we watch Gigi and we know, all right, this guy can score, he can get a shot, he can get to the rim. But definitely the passing and the defense are kind of two things you want to see improve. And, you've seen a little bit of the passing, it's getting a little bit better, but I really have enjoyed, the effort and the intensity with he's played defense and just, this team as a whole. I think, I'm sure you've played basketball. That's you
Mm-hmm.
see a teammate doing that, it makes you want to then go and do that, right? So I think it all
Yeah.
kind of starts with Scottie Pippen and the way he's really defending, and that just kind of rubs off on the rest of his teammates, and they really want to, play defense hard like that guy. So that's been. I mean, I can't imagine trying to play against this team. It seems miserable, but it's great for us to watch.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, you mentioned some players, and I want to ask you. I want to ask you like some quick questions about some players, of course, that kind of stand out. Um, Scottie Pippen was the first one that you mentioned. How you watching him on this summer league? It's
Yeah, he's been.
been really impressive. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Been great. And look, I mean, he was good for the Grizzlies last year too. I know
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the season didn't really matter, and he came at a time when they knew they weren't going to make the playoffs. But I thought he was a bright spot for them, and I think that having him on a two-way contract going into next year is terrific. You don't hopefully you don't have to rely on him too much, but I think what you've seen of him from summer league, you feel pretty good. If he has to come in and play some backup point guard minutes, you feel great.
Mm-hmm.
I think the shot has looked pretty good. He's made some threes. Obviously, we've talked about the defense. He looks like a tremendous on-ball defender, and I just think that guy knows how to play and knows how to set up his teammates. Just kind of like an old school, really smart, high level point guard. I've been thoroughly impressed with Scotty. I'm not sure how he could have done anything better. He had the triple double obviously today in the semifinal game, and he's probably been the MVP of the Grizzlies summer league so far.
Yeah, and okay, I was going to ask you this after, but since you brought up, I'm gonna ask you right away. So I assume from what you said that okay, there's been like a lot of talk if Scotty should be on the two-way or move him to a standard contract. So I assume from your words that you think that maybe for now we should keep him on the two-way. That's what I think. That's my opinion. But what's yours?
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think it's a bad thing to have good players on two-way contracts. Obviously
Hmm.
there's the limit to the number of games they can play, and they can't play in the playoffs. But look, right now as we sit there, he can play 50 games or 55 games, whatever the number is in the regular season. And if that number runs up and he's playing well,
Then you
and
can.
right, and you need him in the
Yeah,
playoffs, then just clear a roster spot and sign him to a deal. But I'm with you. I don't think there's any rush to take him off the two way. It's good to have good players on two way contracts.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I do think the same. I think that the season goes on, we're making the playoffs. He's doing the minutes run out. Even if they don't for the playoffs, he must be on a standard contract. If that's the moment, then we should like then uh, uh, move him to standard contract. Yeah, no hurry. Yeah, I agree with you. Now another player, Gigi, on the summer league.
Yeah,
Your thoughts
GG.
on him?
Yeah, GG, man. He's so I think the first couple
Let me ask you.
games.
Let just
Sure, sure.
sorry, because I didn't. I just watched summer league this year. Did you watch him last year also?
I did. Yeah, sure did.
Okay, so um, what did you think about him last year, but especially this year? Because this is what we're talking about.
Yeah. So, I think I thought last year in summer league, he was pretty good. It's always important to remember just how young he was. I mean, he was
Mm-hmm.
18, um, the youngest player in his draft, and I went back and looked at it. If he was picked in the first round in the 2024 draft, this most recent one, he would have been the
Mm-hmm.
ninth youngest player taken. So he's just. It's pretty shocking how young he is as an NBA player, and so I thought the first summer league, there were some ups and downs. He looked like a teenager, playing against a bunch of grown men, but it was pretty obvious that he was a talented guy. And then he got off to a little bit of a slow start. When they played in Salt Lake City in the Utah
Mm-hmm.
Summer League, he was
Mm-hmm.
okay, kind of had some up and downs, but ever since the Grizzlies got to Las Vegas, he's just getting better and better and better every game. It's still not perfect. He still at times looks like one of the youngest players because he is. But
Yeah.
man, when you look at a guy that is 6'9", can dribble the way he does, can shoot the way he does, some of the stuff where he's able to just kind of twist his body and have really good control and get to the basket and finish, it's impressive, man. It's really fun to watch. So, we kind of talked about the defense too. You can really tell he's cranked up that end and really giving a lot of effort there. So, I've been impressed. I think there's nothing you can say other than it's been a successful summer for GG.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure, I agree with you. And okay, now also Cam Spencer.
Hmm.
He's been out for a couple of games. He's not going to play again. It was kind of a surprise to me. Not a surprise, not in the sense that I wasn't expect. I didn't know what to expect for him. From him. How did you see him also in the summer league?
Yeah, man, I thought Cam was great. Obviously a very accomplished college basketball player, winning a national championship at UConn, playing a starting spot. He's a very integral piece to that team. And coming in, he's an older guy, right? He's 24 years old, so you
Mm-hmm.
would expect him, yeah, to kind of feel comfortable out there.
To be more
And he came
mature.
out in summer league. He looked fantastic. I mean, he made shots. He passed the ball very well. I think the thing with Cam that is going to be interesting to watch is he finishes up summer league and then starts to get into NBA play. He's not the best athlete. He's not the fastest. He doesn't jump the highest. He's not the quickest. Um, but I just think he's a really smart basketball player who can shoot the cover off the ball. And um, I'm very interested to see how that
You mean
translates.
basketball IQ?
Yeah, just high basketball IQ. He understands the game, man. You can just see it the way he plays. His positioning when he gets the ball, he knows exactly what he wants to do, and he does everything he can to accomplish it. And you just can't leave him open, or he's going to shoot it very well. So I've been very impressed with Cam, and I think that when you pick a guy in the 50s, your expectations aren't very high. But
Mm-hmm.
he's been terrific and looks like a guy that if they needed him to, he should be able to help out, the Grizzlies in the regular season.
Yeah, Yeah, I agree. Okay, so also Jalen Wells, he didn't start particularly well, uh, but then he kind of locked on. He did a very good game today. Um, your thoughts on Wells, Jalen Wells?
Yeah, Jalen, you're right. He struggled early. The shot wasn't falling, and he kind of looked like he was a little lost. And I understand it. These guys are coming in from college, and here's their first professional experience. And I'm sure he's nervous. And I think a lot of these guys experience that. But like you
Yeah.
mentioned, I mean, he game by game is just starting to look more and more comfortable. And you could see the confidence today when he was playing. I mean, he hit 6 3-pointers in a very close game. Yeah, like the Grizzlies needed every single one of those buckets. And like the shooting form, you could put that on an instructional video and send that to everybody because it is perfect. The way that he gets his feet set, he's got perfect form that looks the exact same every time. I went
Mm-hmm.
back and looked. He's hit 18 of his 19 free throws, which is always a really good indicator of shooting touch. So he's got great touch on his shot. Um, I liked him quite a bit when he was playing at Washington State in college, and I would have taken him in the first round. So I was excited when the Grizzlies got him in the second round. And it may take him a couple years because he's still just 20 years old. He's a young guy,
Mm-hmm.
but I again, I'm very impressed, especially, he had the game winner where he hit the floater and scored
Yeah.
27 points that
In
game. He did
concrete.
it on like 20 shots. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
today he scores 28, only shooting the ball 12 times. So, yeah, I mean, it's been fun to watch him play this year too.
Yeah. And okay, so a player we didn't get to watch very much was Edie. To be honest, I didn't watch the first game, so I didn't watch him, and I watched the last game, and he only played like couple of minutes.
Hmm.
How did you see Edie taking it?
Yeah. It's disappointing that we haven't gotten to see him more. I think everyone would love to just see this guy
Of
because
course.
when you're 7'4", 7'5", and come out and score 14 points and hit the game tying tap in with your first game, and he was playing against Walker Kessler, who's probably going to be the starting center for Utah. I mean, he
Mm,
looked great going against him. And really, I thought the game you were able to watch, where like you said, only played, I don't know, 7 or 8 minutes.
yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, and he scored 6 points. He had a really nice block. Um, I thought he's been great. What's been impressive to me, and when you're trying to watch these guys in summer league, you think, all right, what's this going to look like when they're out there playing with the regular Grizzlies, with Ja and Jaren and Desmond Bain and all these guys? The big thing, two things that I think Edie will immediately help with. One is the rebounding. I mean, it's just, when you're that big and that
That's right.
strong, it's kind of like Steven Adams, right? He was always
Yeah.
in position to grab the rebounds. Well, the thing is he's got the size of Steven Adams, but he's 4 or 5 inches taller. I mean, he's quite a bit bigger than Adams. So we're going to have the help there on the rebounds, but also the way he sets screens and watching these guys who are a full foot shorter than he is, trying to fight around these screens, he just creates so much space. I remember the first pick and roll he ran with Scottie Pippen. Scotty's man ran right into Edie and just died on that screen. He could not get around it. And Scotty had probably 10 feet to stand there and pull up a wide open jump shot. And Scotty's been great all summer league, but I just think, all right, when he's setting that screen and then John Morant can take
I was
off
going
full,
to ask you
yeah.
how do you see that setting that screen with John Moran going
Oh
up?
man, when his man gets caught up on Edie's screen and he's going downhill towards the basket, and you've got, Desmond Bain standing in one corner and maybe Luke Kennard if they re-sign him in the other corner, and Jaren Jackson's right next to the basket and Ja Morant's going towards the rim. I mean, I don't know how you stop it. You're either going to give up an open three, you're going to give up a Ja Morant layup, or Ja's going to be able to dump it off to Jaren who can dunk it. I mean, I'm excited to watch that because
Hmm.
it's going to be a real advantage for the Grizzlies.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. We all are. Okay, for to finish the summer league, what do you what do you expect to see tomorrow? Well, at this time can be the Heat or the Warriors. What do you expect to see tomorrow for the Grizzlies tomorrow in the summer league?
So obviously playing one of two good teams. I believe, yeah, it looks like the Heat actually won, so it will be the Miami Heat.
Okay.
That's a good summer league team. I mean, they've obviously got Khalil Ware, who was a first round pick, Josh
Mm-hmm.
Christopher, another first round pick, who very briefly was with the Grizzlies. A couple other really good players, Pella Larson, Alondis Williams. It's a good team. It's a very talented team. I'll be interested to see if Jake LaRavia is able to play tomorrow or if they just shut him down for the remainder of Summer League. But it'll be a tough game. And, you know, it's fascinating because, something that is always talked about in the NBA is this heat culture, right? About
Yeah.
how they play tough, they defend well, they dive after loose balls, they try to get steals, and they
Yeah, but
they're
okay, but I'm sorry to interrupt you, but can
yeah.
we say that that's also like a Greece culture?
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, exactly. Like
Okay.
you say all that stuff, and then you look at what the Grizzlies are trying to do. They do the exact same things, right? Um,
Yeah.
so it's going to be great to watch, man. It's two teams that I think want to play the game the exact same way, and I think it's going to be fantastic to watch. I mean, I think it's going to be two teams who are going to get after it from the opening tip all the way to the end. And look, I mean, I want the Grizzlies to win. I want to win our
Of
second
course.
summer league championship. So of course, I'm going to predict the Grizzlies to win.
Yeah, yeah, of course, me too, me too. Okay, so moving back to the draft. Uh, were you Edie guy, a Klingon guy, or neither one of these guys?
I was. Can I be a both of them guy?
Oh, yeah, you can.
Okay, so I um I ranked Donovan Klingon seventh, and I ranked Zach Edey 10th. So
Okay.
I was high on both of them. The reason I had Klingon just a little bit higher is one, defense. I think that Klingon can anchor a great defense. I mean, the guy blocks shots. He understands defensive assignments and different things like that. I think he sets screens very well, but also just the mobility. I think he moves just marginally, but just a little bit better than Zach Edey does. But
Hmm.
on the flip side, you go back and for Zach Edey, his offensive game is far superior to what Donovan Klingon has right now. Klingon's like 2 years younger. I think Edey's 22, Klingon's 20. So he's a little bit older. He's played more college basketball. He's got more experience. So his game on offense is far more developed than Klingon's is. But I don't know that Zach Edey will ever reach the defensive levels that Donovan Klingon has. But at the same time, I don't think Donovan Klingon will ever be the low post dominant scorer that Zach Edey is. So, specifically for the Grizzlies, I think
Hmm.
Edey makes a ton of sense because even if he's not the best defender, I think that's okay because obviously Jaren Jackson is probably the best, help side off ball defender that there is in the NBA. That's what won him Defensive Player of the Year 2 seasons ago. And
Hmm.
then you also have patrolling on the wings, Marcus Smart and Vince Williams, who are two of the best wing defenders that exist in the NBA. So you can kind of shield Edey some of his, defensive shortcomings with the roster that the Grizzlies have right now. So I think for the Grizzlies, Edie probably makes more sense than Klingon does, just based on what they do well.
Okay, and either way, were you surprised when we draft Klingon at ninth, or were we not?
No, I wasn't shocked. Just because, I mean, I think you look at it, we all knew that at some point this offseason they were going to get a starting center.
Uh-huh.
Zach Kleinman said that. Taylor Jenkins, I believe, said that as well. That that was clearly a need, was to bring in a big man. So at that point, it was just a question of, okay, are they going to trade for this big man? Are they going to sign them in free agency, or are they going to use their lottery pick? And they went the route of lottery pick. And I don't know that in the draft there's a more, quote unquote NBA ready player than Zach
Mm-hmm.
Edey. He's been the focal point of a very, very good college basketball team for the better part of 3 seasons. He won College Player of the Year the last 2 times, which is
Yeah.
incredibly rare. And I think he can step in, and you feel really good about him playing, 25 minutes a game for the Grizzlies next year as their starting center. So when you just take all that into account, no, I mean, I really wasn't surprised that that's who they selected.
Yep. Okay, we're gonna go back there in just a couple of minutes. Also, the second round, Wells and Cam, where you mentioned something about, I believe, Cam Spencer or Wells, I'm not sure. Um, how did you see those two picks from the Grizzlies on the second round? I
Uh, I,
remember
I,
Kleinman said that after the draft, he said that they were hoping to get at least they were hoping to get one, and they got both.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I ranked Jalen Wells 27th on my board. They obviously got him at 39. So I thought that was an excellent pick. He obviously, Jalen's a little bit younger. He's got a unique story where, it's pretty well known now, but he played very, very low tier college basketball, Division two.
Yeah, yeah,
At,
I
at
read that. Yeah, I read that. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
and
yeah.
it was, the story basically goes that when COVID happened, the college basketball basically gave everyone an extra season. And so what that did is there wasn't as much turnover on the rosters. And so a lot of guys were, should have not been able to play college anymore, and they were granted an extra season. So some of the schools that were recruiting Jalen Wells just did not have a spot for him. So he had to go to, Division two Sonoma State in California, where he's from. And he did so well for 2 years. He got spotted by Washington State, came in and didn't have the biggest role early in the season. But as the season went on, he became better and better, and his role continued to expand. And Washington State was a very good college team this past year, and he was probably their best player. So I just think you look at what he brought to Washington with the jump shooting. He can kind of take guys off the dribble, hit a pull up jumper. Um, that stuff is what I really look for when I'm thinking about guys who are going to be wing role players in the NBA. And I think we've seen it too in summer league. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's a pretty good athlete, right? Like he can
Yeah.
jump, he can move really well, he's pretty quick. So I think he can be a pretty good defender as well. So huge fan of the Jalen Wells pick. I'm like I think I maybe mentioned earlier, but I don't necessarily expect him to contribute a ton next season. But maybe,
Mm-hmm.
season after, year two, year three, I could really see him breaking into the rotation and being a good player for the Grizzlies. Cam Spencer was interesting. I had him 46 on my board. They drafted him in the 50s. So, again, I thought it was really good value. Um, the thing with me that made me just a little bit lower, two things. One, which we talked about a little bit, is he's just not the best athlete. And
Okay.
so, at some level, you have to be at some level you have to be an athlete to play in the NBA. And I think Cam probably is going to be one of the lower tier athletes in the NBA, but he's such a good basketball player that may not matter a ton. Like he'll probably never be a starter. He almost certainly will never, make an all-star game or something like that.
Yeah.
But I do think that he can be, a reliable shooter, a guy you feel very comfortable. If you need him to play point guard or play off the ball, he can do either one. And then he's got pretty active hands. Like he does create some turnovers on defense. So I'm interested to see kind of how it goes for him. He's older too, like we mentioned. He's 24. He's one of the older guys in this past draft. So usually when a guy's older, maybe there's not as much upside with their game. They kind of are what they are. To a certain degree, everybody will improve, right? But a 24-year-old's not going to improve throughout his career as much as a 18, 19-year-old is. But yeah, I think Cam can play in the NBA, and it would not surprise me if he makes some big threes for the Grizzlies in the next few years.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, you mentioned okay. You mentioned the the building from the drafts because the Grizzlies being a small market team, and I was checking. Like I think that on right now, like on our roster, if I'm not wrong, and like taking the two ways, they have like 9 players that came out of the drafts. How do you evaluate the front office, namely Zach Lyman, work on this?
Yeah, I think I think
And
that
and also and also
yeah,
and also I'm sorry,
no, it's good.
and also like on an overall, because Kleinman is like a kind of a controversial personality. I think all GMs are at certain
Sure.
point. So how do you see, but especially focus on the draft, because as I mentioned, Ja was on the draft, Des was Jaron, draft Jaron, Edie, Gigi, Vince, BC, Santi, um, Wells, Jake. So at least all these were. I'm not sure if I'm forgetting anyone, but they all were drafted by the Grizzlies. How do you see the front office work on this?
Yeah, for the draft specifically, I don't know if there is a team that has done a better job of drafting in the positions that they were given. So you think about like since Kleiman came in, they've really this was only their second lottery pick that they've had, Zach Edey. The other one obviously was John
Also,
Morant.
yeah.
Right. But you look at how they've drafted in the late first round and then in the second round. I mean, you mentioned a lot of the guys. Brandon Clark has been very good for them. He was a second round guy. Excuse me, he was picked in the 20s. Desmond Bain was picked 30. Santi
30,
Aldama picked 30. Gigi Jackson picked 45. I think Vince Williams was also picked 45.
47, I think.
47. Okay,
Yeah.
47. Yeah, and I mean, that is pretty remarkable that they were able to get starters and high level role players in the late first round and the second round. If you just go and look at the landscape of the NBA and what other teams have done in the late first round and on into the second round, they just don't have this level of success. It's pretty remarkable what they've done. To be honest with you, I think that um, you mentioned. I think there probably are some people who are frustrated with climate and some of the. I think they're probably more frustrated with the lack of maybe adding another big star to the team or something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
um, what done is they've been able to build in a sustainable way. They draft well. They're constantly replenishing the talent that they lose, whether that be in free agency or whatever. They're always able to go out and find these hidden gems, these guys, and later in the draft that have been able to come in and produce. And I just we talked about it a little bit earlier, but the you take that and you think about what the Grizzlies came from with Chris Wallace, who just could not hit on any of his draft picks to kind of help that the core four make that next jump and get to an NBA Finals. I think Kleiman is currently doing that with Ja, Jared, and Dez, and being able to good players on cheap contracts around them, and to help them out. So just strictly talking about the draft, I think that Zach Kleinman and his staff have been one of the best, if not the best, in the NBA at drafting.
Okay, and the draft, besides the draft, because okay, you said that, and I agree with you that some of the critics point not bringing a big name, uh, which I think that it depends on your philosophy of on how you're building a team, and it can be counterproductive. I think this is word, counterproducent, maybe. Um, so, what I want to ask you, two things. There was the free agency, and the Grizzlies didn't acquire anyone. Well, they acquired someone now, just on the Zaire trade, and we're gonna get to there. But do you think that it was needed? And another question, because you mentioned that, okay, it was obvious that we needed center, a starting center. Do we also need a backup center now? And so two questions. Uh, how did you see, at least for now, Cruz is not moving in free agency? Was it necessary to move, or is it wise not to move just right now? And the second question, do we need another center?
So the first question, I don't think that it's necessary to. Um, I don't. If you just look at the roster as a whole, I don't know that
Uh-huh.
there's one obvious large hole that they need to fill, other than, like you mentioned, the starting center spot. And they went out and got, a 22-year-old who should be pretty NBA ready, who was a two-time, college player of the year. So
Yeah.
I think they did a pretty good job there because, you know, one thing that I think gets lost sometimes is they have Zach Edey on a relatively cheap contract as far as a starting center goes. They'll have him on that contract for 4 years. And then if things go well, you then have him, you have his rights to basically extend him for 5 years past that. So if all things go well, you'll be able to have the guy that you want your starting center to be for the next 9 seasons.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really good move, assuming that, Edie does work out and he can be the starter that they think. But as far as, kind of the not making any moves and not being active in free agency, I mean, the truth is the roster is pretty full as is.
Yeah.
They
Mm-hmm.
don't have money to spend really. It's not like they, are sitting on a bunch of money, cap space that they can just go sign a bunch of guys. They have, a very small exception, but the person who's going to take that probably isn't going to be a difference maker to this team that already has a pretty good roster. So, to personally, I didn't really have a problem with the relative inactivity, I guess you'd call it, in free agency.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then as far as adding one more big, I think it's fine if that's what they want to do. I don't think that it's necessarily a make or
Priority?
break. Sorry, go ahead.
A priority?
Yeah, not like a priority or something that's gonna like make or break this season. Like the
Mm-hmm.
fact whether they add a backup big man or fourth or fifth big man, it's not going to win them or lose them the championship most likely if that's where they make it. One guy that we didn't talk about in summer league is Trey Jamison,
I was
who
going to
is
ask. I was
yeah
going to ask you. Yeah.
yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to jump the gun, but yeah, Trey, I think he's been okay in summer league. He hasn't been bad. He's had some really good moments. But
Uh-huh.
if you have your kind of fifth big on a two-way deal, and we saw Trey Jamison last year, I thought he looked fine for the most part.
Uh,
If you
yeah.
need him to come in and play spot, 8 to 10 minutes here and there per night, I think he can definitely do that. Now, if they get into the season and somebody gets hurt or a couple people get hurt, then Zach Kleiman is going to have to move, and he is going to have to go acquire somebody if they want to continue to try to contend this season. But I don't view it as like a huge need or a huge priority. If an opportunity arises, that's great, go do it. But otherwise, I don't think I don't think it's something that, like I said, is going to make or break this season.
So I take it from your words that we are at the moment, we are good as we are. Also, given because you mentioned it, and also that's a fact, and sometimes people don't really pay attention to that. Like the roster is like pretty filled right now, so it's not like you can just go and pick up someone like that. So if I got it right from your words, we're good to go as it is right now, and then if something is needed, we make a move along the next season. That's right.
Yeah,
That's what I.
that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, that's kind of where I land on all that. They don't have to force a move or anything like that. And if a good opportunity arises, of course take it. But I think that they should feel pretty good about where the roster is, and if they get into next season and some injuries happen or whatever happens, you can always make a move in season to go get somebody.
Yeah. Okay. And okay. So we at the five position now we have Edie, of course. We have BC, who also plays the five. As you mentioned, we have Trey, and he impressed me last year, and is also making an impression this summer league. I really like him, and I think, like as you said, like to play like 10 minutes, 15 minutes a game, he should be okay. Um, so. Uh, but that may raise the question that sometimes we have may have to play Jaren at the five.
Hmm.
What okay, this is like an ongoing perpetuous question on
Hmm.
Twitter and Chris Twitter. What's your thoughts on Jaren playing at the five? I have to
Yeah.
ask you this.
Yeah. It's that's the question that everyone loves to talk about. So I think Jaron is. I think the best we have seen from Jaron is when he has been, playing the four, playing the power forward next to Jonas Valanciunas or next to Steven Adams, and next year going into playing next to Zach Edey. I think that frees him up to be kind of a guy on defense who can block shots, who can get steals, who can just kind of cause havoc on that end, but also on offense, it allows him to play away from the basket. And, we saw last year, he got so good at taking guys off the dribble and getting to the basket.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that is the best version of Jaron. But I do think that he can play center if you need him to. Um, like in the playoffs, if you get the right matchup and say that, let's say Zach Edey is having to guard someone who's just a lot quicker and things aren't going well, well, then
Mm-hmm.
um, he's able to come in and play the five, or have BC play the five, and Jaron can kind of play the 4-5, and they can
Of
kind of
course.
tag team it, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I think that it just kind of goes to the overall point of Kleinman and how he's built this roster. There are so many options and different lineup combinations, and no matter what you throw at the Grizzlies from a lineup perspective, they should have a counter for that, something that they can put together out there that makes sense not only for the Grizzlies but to stop whatever the opposition is trying to do. So if you want to put a really big guy out there, that's probably not the best situation for Jaron. So that's more of a Zach Edey assignment, right? But
Yeah.
if you want to
Yeah. For
go,
sure.
if you want to go small and try to have a bunch of quick guys running around out there, well, that's perfect. That's where Jaron's going to thrive at playing at the five. So I think I guess I would say it like this. I think Jaron's best as a power forward, but I think
Mm-hmm.
against certain lineups, he makes a lot of sense playing the five and can be really good at it.
Okay. So that leads us again to the question of how the front office, Kleiman, is building this roster. And you mentioned your takes on the mainly on the draft and uh, other than the draft. How do you evaluate his work so far, Kleinman?
Yeah, I think he's done a really good job. He hasn't been perfect. I think he would probably tell you he hasn't been perfect. You know,
Okay.
he's a very young general manager, and this is the first time he's done this. But I think that when you just look at this roster as a whole, they're not going to have to pay the luxury tax. They're not, you know, up against the first apron or second apron. So they haven't had to pay a ton of money to field a really competitive team. Like you mentioned earlier, they've built it almost entirely through the draft and a few very smart, you know, trades and free agent acquisitions. And, you know, kind of like I was just mentioning, the the way they built this roster, it matches up with a lot of different teams. You know, I guess, you know, an easy way to say it is there's just
Mm-hmm.
a lot of good players from, you know, Ja Morant, the first guy on the team, all the way to the end of the roster, you know, whoever that is, Jake LaRavia or whatever. Um, Everybody in between that is a good player. And
Mm-hmm.
they
Mm-hmm.
should feel very good about where the team is. And everyone should feel pretty confident in the fact that they should be able to match up with most teams most nights and be really good. So I think if you just look at it that way, I think it's hard to say anything other than Kleiman's done a really good job. It hadn't been perfect. I think at times it's probably been frustrating for fans, but you know what? This is a team that realistically next season should feel like they are easily going to make the playoffs. And then from then on out, we'll see what happens, whether they win, you know, first round, second round, whatever. I don't think anything would surprise me. So it's a good team, and it's still a pretty young team, just based on the key players all being in their early to mid 20s. So
Yeah.
he's done it in a sustainable way that they should be able to keep this team together for several more years and try to win a championship.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I want to ask you because the news just came out yesterday. Zaire was traded to the Nets. It was a 10th pick, I believe.
Hmm.
Um, I think, on my perspective, it was like the obvious thing that was going to happen. Not that I have anything against Zaire. I defended him like a ton of times. But yeah, what do you think that didn't go well with Zaire and the Grizzlies? Sometimes it's just chemistry, is well, whatever. But how did you see this? Of course, we needed the roster spot and we needed to clear the salary, the cap space. But
Right.
how do you feel about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think just the move in general was a good move because, you know, like you mentioned, they needed the roster spot and it got them further away from having to pay the tax. And so that should, you know, obviously, as we are recording this, Luke Kennard is still not re-signed, but I think everyone expects, you know, that move was made so that they can give Luke Kennard the contract and bring him back for next season. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I thought the move was good. They only had to pay a second round pick that's, you know, 5 years away or 6 years away, something like that. So it's not like they had
Six.
to pay, yeah, 6 years away. So it's not like they had to pay a very heavy price to move off of Zaire's money. And that all makes sense. As for Zaire, um, you know, it's not every draft pick is going to work out. And Zaire was a unique situation because the 1 year he spent in college was the year when COVID was really bad. It was the 2020-2021 season.
Mm-hmm.
And he was playing, you know, in Stanford out in California. And I remember Stanford was not even able to play home games, so they were having to play in, you know, different arenas than they were used to, and it was his first season in college, and so he really wasn't very good. He had some moments where he looked good, but he just really didn't have a very good freshman season. So he was really hard to evaluate when I was watching him because you saw some flashes of this 6'9", 6'10", like ball handler, shot maker, and you think,
Mm-hmm.
okay, yeah, like that. If we can work with this, then I think that's interesting. And then comes in his rookie season and looks like he's going to be able to play. He's making some shots against the Warriors, in the
Mm-hmm.
postseason,
Yeah.
and looking like a guy who could defend on the ball and just look great. And then it turns out that was the best we were ever going to see. He had some unfortunate injuries and stuff like that just I think kind of messed with his development. And I think that for Zaire, a he seems like a really just good guy, just always
Yeah.
had a smile on his face, like
Yeah.
just
For
easy
sure.
guy to
Yeah.
root for.
Hmm. Yeah.
But I think for him, I think he would probably say that it was good for him to go and get a fresh start in Brooklyn and try to, get his career back on track because I think it was pretty obvious to everyone who watched that it just wasn't going to work for him with the Grizzlies. And, that's okay. Not every pick's going to work out.
Yeah.
But yeah,
As you
I am.
mentioned in the beginning, as we
Yeah,
mentioned in the
exactly.
beginning of our conversation. Yeah.
Exact. There's no science to it. The way you asked it, yeah, perfect
Yeah.
example of there's no science to this.
Yeah. 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 I agree. Just, you brought up Kennard. So you think okay, I also think we're bringing back Kennard. Um, what's your
Yeah,
expectation like on what kind of deal? Like, because we declined the team option, which was 14 million, I think. So, uh, what kind of contract you see? If if you see, of course, I'm asking. Uh, we getting with Kennard for him to come back. Hello. Hey.
hello.
Oh, did you
Hey.
listen? Sorry. I don't know if you listened to me.
Yeah, yeah. I got your question. Sorry about that. I think
Yeah,
my
that's
headphones got
cool.
dis the
Yeah, it's
headphones
okay.
got disconnected for a second. But yeah, so I do think they'll bring Luke Kennard back. I think that his shooting it just provides so much for the offense with his spacing and John Moran and Jaron and Desmond Bain and these guys to be able to attack. It's always good to have as many shooters out there as you can in case teams want to help off and clog up the paint. He's there to knock down a shot. So I do think it sounds like all the reporters are saying that a deal will be worked out. If I had to guess, it would probably be something like 2 years, 20 million, or three
Hmm.
years, 27 million, something like that, where,
Hmm.
it's a lower number per year for the Grizzlies. And Luke Kennard ends up making more money over the course of a couple years than the 1 year, $14 million he was owed. So that would just be a guess, though. I don't know. Knowing the cap and all that stuff is not always my forte, but I think they could sign him to one of those two deals. It would keep them below the tax and kind of make everybody happy.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. So I was checking. I don't know if I forgot someone. Okay. So we had Des, Jaren, Smart, Marcus. You were eager like to see Marcus Smart playing like a full healthy Grizzlies
Oh
team.
man,
Oh man.
absolutely.
Oh man. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Oh man.
Yeah, yeah, we got to see this guy, man. He's such a good competitor. Like, the Grizzlies fans fell in love with Tony Allen back in the day, and I think
Mm-hmm.
Marcus Smart brings so many of the same personality qualities to the team, but also his play on the floor. Just a tough, tough player that Grizzlies fans in Memphis and all over the place just have always appreciated. When somebody's working hard defensively, scrapping for every loose ball, diving on the floor, grabbing rebounds, getting steals. Grizzlies fans have always loved that, and that's exactly what Marcus Smart does. So I'm incredibly hopeful and that he'll be able to be healthy next season and give us a full season because I know we always talk about the big three of Ja and Dez and Jaron, But I
Yeah.
think Marcus Smart is very close to that number 4 guy. We just need
Mm-hmm.
him to be healthy for a full season because, if you get that, then you really can start thinking about, wow, can this team go and make a Western Conference Finals? Can they even make an NBA Finals? So he's kind of the key that I think will unlock a lot of that potential.
Yeah, that's a pretty good take. You got there. Yeah. Um. Yeah, it can be the key to unlock. That's what you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I never thought about it that way, but I agree. Um. Okay, so moving on to last season. Of course, last season was yeah. I just like it was of course it was tough to watch. I didn't just watch. I watched like 79 games. Just didn't watch three. It's easier to count the ones that I
Wow.
didn't watch. Yeah, but um, although it was on my point of view, of course, and I want to know your point of view, not mine. Um, I think that in some senses, it could turn out to be Uh, there's this expression, a blessing in disguise.
Hmm.
Uh, because, okay, main points I want to focus my own, but you can develop your own as you wish, of course. There's being put on new positions like being the center of other team scouts that usually were up to Ja. Then the same thing happened to Jaden. Of course, Vince and Gigi emerging, and also like this thing that it kind of struck me is during the season, like the season went so bad at uh like record wise we got 27 wins, but that can also like build character,
Hmm.
and it can like translate into next season, because I imagine like those guys, they're like eager to go into next season and like just to I don't know expression in English, it's just to play basketball, and you know um so how did you see last season on this, on Jaren? Of course, the silver linings, Gigi and Vince were the more obvious. You can point to any other one that you think, and also on the mentality of the Grizzlies team.
Yeah, I'm with you. I watched. I think I ended up watching all 82 games. And look, I pride myself on knowing every player that plays for the Grizzlies and most players that play in the NBA. But there were a couple guys that suited up for the Grizzlies last year that I had just never heard of before they played for the Grizzlies. So it
Yeah.
was a tough year. But I think you put it very well. Desmond Bain, obviously he was hurt, but the times we did see him having the ball in his hands and being forced to kind of take more responsibility on offense, I think is something that will be very good for them in years to come. And the exact same thing with Jaren Jackson. I think his defense probably was not as good as the year before when he won
Of course.
Defensive Player of the Year, but
Hmm.
that's because he had to take on so much responsibility on offense. But, kind of like you mentioned, we saw such a leap from him, his taking guys off the dribble, the shooting, the low post scoring, everything was just to a degree that we'd never seen before out of him. I think we all knew that he could do this stuff, but it was so good to see him finally, score over 20 points a game and just be that guy that I think so many Grizzlies fans have wanted him to be. And so
Hmm.
him doing that will pay dividends down the road as well. But I'm with you. I think the two players that likely would not have gotten the opportunity they got had it not been for the season being what it was are
For
Vince
sure.
Williams and Gigi Jackson. specifically Vince,
Mhm.
because Vince, I was at the game when they played the Celtics, and it was Vince had just started to kind of crack into the rotation,
The first
and he
game
was,
in
yeah,
Memphis,
yeah,
I
yeah,
remember that
exactly,
game. Yeah, yeah, I
yeah.
remember.
Yeah, he was guarding Jason Tatum, and he was doing
Uh-huh.
such a good job on Tatum.
Yeah.
And my brother went to the game with me, and I remember looking at him and just saying, like, "Hey, we have something here. This kid is really good. I mean, he is giving Jason Tatum just absolute fits when he's defending him, and he shot the ball pretty well. He can dribble the ball a little bit. Like he does a lot of stuff, man. And I'm really excited to see Vince next season. And then of course Gigi, like he was incredible for the hustle in the G League. And then he finally gets his opportunity to play with the Grizzlies, and he was great. And again, I feel like I have to say this every time. He only turned 19 last December, so he was
Yep.
so young doing this against grown men in the best league in the world. And that stuff just does not happen very often. So those two guys emerging the way that they did, along with Dez and Jaron kind of getting some opportunities that they probably wouldn't have had if Ja and the whole team was healthy.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's going to be huge for them moving forward. And then I think, like you mentioned, these are some guys who, this core group of guys, for as young as they are, they've had some pretty good success. They've won
Yeah.
50 games in the regular season multiple times. They've won playoff games. They've won playoff series. So to have all that taken away from you last year, I can only imagine that makes you want to just come back for it all the following season and make sure that you don't miss an opportunity like they had last season. So yeah, I think that they're going to come out, like
Hmm.
crazy next season and try
Yeah.
to establish themselves back in the top of the West. Because, I mean, you even think about it, the way that they were talked about 2 seasons ago was this fun young team, best core in the Western Conference,
Uh-huh.
future title contenders. And now everybody's kind of forgotten about them. It's the Oklahoma City
Totally.
Thunder who are the new
Yeah.
young team. Yeah,
I
or
was
even the
thinking about
Celtics.
them. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm confident that they're aware of that. They hear that talk, and they want to get back next season, and they want to establish themselves as, hey, we're still young, we're still really good, and you still have to go through us if you want to win the West.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you made me come up with another question, because I relate, of course, on all the players, especially the main three that you mentioned, Des, Jaren, and Ja, of course. I remember Jaren saying in an interview right after the last season ended, "We don't ever want to be in this position again." So
Hmm.
that's one take. The other, what I wanted to ask you, like, Ja has been really quiet, and qu- quiet Ja is a good Ja. I love it, but I
Yes.
want to know your answer. But 'cause I want to. It's like quiet Ja, a good Ja. So
Yeah. Look.
like he
So
seems more locked in. Uh,
yes.
okay, so
I
elaborate.
agree. No, I agree. Look, here's the thing. What something John Morant has this. You look in America, we call it. He's got an aura about him, right? Like
Uh-huh. I know that.
he
Yeah,
carries himself like a superstar.
yeah,
And I think maybe that got to him a little bit. And he did some things, on Instagram Live and stuff like that that
yeah, yeah,
otherwise he wouldn't do. I think John Morant is a good person. I've seen the way that
for
he's
sure.
interacted with kids in Memphis, and
And
they
the
all love him. And
community
he
also.
exactly, yeah, he does stuff in the community to help out, and I think he's a good guy. And I think that you don't want to take away what makes Ja special, that fun personality that he has. When he's on the court and he's playing well, he's having so much fun. And no one ever wants to see that go away, right?
Of course.
But we want to
Yeah,
have the balance of, hey, just make sure that what you're doing off the court matches what you're doing, in the community and on the court too. And I think that we've finally reached that balance of we're not hearing negative stuff about him. Everything's been positive. You know, he's had his camps here in Memphis, and he's got a grassroots AAU program going in his home of South Carolina. And he seems to be doing a lot of that stuff, going to their games, helping coach. And I'm so excited to see this guy because you know, the 9 games that we did get to see him, he was incredible. He looked like one of the best players in the NBA. So I think we're going to get that more next season too.
Yeah, yeah, I am sure of that. I am sure of that. Okay, so going into next season, I have like two last questions to ask
All
you.
right.
TJ, how do you, it's like this the year for TJ?
Uh,
Meaning, it's kind of, I'm not saying it is, I'm asking, meaning, um, okay, there's been some moves in the coaching staff. Carter, also Thomas Lizalo from Paris FC, who had like the best offensive rating in the world.
mm-hmm.
Um, so, what do you think that it is, or maybe at stake with TJ? And I'm not trying to put TJ at stake because I really like him. But main question is, do you think that he's the guy to take us there, or do you think that maybe there may be the need for another coach to take us there, or you don't know?
Yeah, you know, it's a good question. I don't know that I could tell you with certainty one way or the other. I think the
Hmm.
way I would answer that is we've seen Taylor Jenkins be successful enough with a young team to where he deserves to continue to keep his job. And I think until there is something where the team is fully healthy and, you know, they're not achieving the success that is equal to the level of talent they have, then I think he should continue to be the coach. But I will say it is interesting that they have had this pretty substantial shakeup in the staff around him. You know, I obviously I don't know Taylor Jenkins. I don't know the front office. I don't. So this is just me guessing here,
Hmm.
right? But
Of
my
course.
guess is that there was a little bit of collaboration between Taylor Jenkins and the front office of saying the front office probably went to Taylor and said, "Hey, I think it'd be best if you made some changes, and these are some guys that we like." And he went out, and he was, to his credit, very receptive to those changes. And
Yeah.
I think that that speaks well of him and his willingness to say, "Hey,
Hmm.
maybe
For sure.
things aren't going exactly the way we want it to. I'm willing to admit that, and let's change some things up and let's see where that gets us." But it is always worth questioning. Hey, a bunch of coaches are changing. What does this mean for the head coach? And I think it means that he better continue to win and have success. Otherwise, I think that they are probably willing to move on from him. But just me personally, in my opinion, I think Taylor Jenkins is a good coach, and I'm not asking for him to be fired. And I think that
Hmm.
the way he's coached the team when healthy is good, and it's earned him, you know, at least another season to see what where this is going to go and what the team looks like when it's fully healthy. So I'm fascinated to see what influence the new coaches have. You mentioned the guy from Paris basketball, seemingly one of the best offensive minds in the world.
Hmm.
I'd love that. I think Taylor Jenkins is smart to want to bring guys on his staff who can show him something a little different, maybe something that people in the NBA aren't even familiar with. So yeah, I'm very excited to see what they can do with Edie and then with everyone else healthy around them and kind of what that looks like. So yeah, I'm good with Taylor Jenkins. I think he's a good coach. And I'm interested to see how this season goes and what they decide to do moving forward.
Okay, one quick question. You mentioned that you played basketball. Okay, and I noticed there's like this strong connection between the main core and Grizzlies and TJ. How is that important in a basketball team?
I think it's very important. I think that, you know, you have to respect the guy that is coaching you because, these are the best players in the world, right? And so
Hmm.
Taylor
Hmm.
Jenkins he's not going to be able to go in there and teach them like they're a
Of
bunch of 8-year-olds playing basketball for the
course.
first time. These guys, right? Like these guys
Yeah.
know what they're doing. They're the best in the world. And I think that the fact that they all speak so highly of him and they all like him, I think that means a lot because they respect what he's telling them. And they also respect the fact that he knows what he's doing and he's putting them in the best positions to win. So, yeah, I think that that's incredibly important because it's, to be honest with you, towards the end of the core four, Mike, Mark, Tony, and Zach,
Hmm.
David Fizdale was the Grizzlies coach, and I think it's pretty well documented that Mark Gasol and David Fizdale did not get along, and they did
Hmm.
not enjoy working with each other. And David Fizdale was very quickly let go as Grizzlies coach. So I
Hmm.
think it's very important, and I think it's a very good sign that all the players really like Taylor Jenkins.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. So now I promise you, these are the two last questions.
All right.
How do you envision next season? Okay, given starting point, we remain healthy.
Okay, if they remain healthy, I
Yeah.
think that this team can win at least 50 games, and I think they
Hmm.
can win at least one playoff series. And then after that, we'll see. It wouldn't surprise me if they made a run to the Western Conference Finals, but it also wouldn't surprise me if they, win one playoff series and then go home in the second round. Because we have to remember the Grizzlies are good, the roster's good, we feel good about it, but there's like 10 other teams in the Western Conference who also
Hmm.
feel the exact same way. So
Yeah,
it's going
yeah.
to be very, very difficult. But if healthy, this is a 50-win team to me, at least.
Okay. Okay, so last question. You're from Memphis, or do you live in Memphis? Because I'm
I'm
not
from
sure.
Memphis, yeah.
Okay, so
Born and raised. I've been here
okay,
almost all my life.
okay, so usually I make this question from people that are not from Memphis, from other parts of the world. How did they become Memphis Grizzlies fan? But from people from Memphis, I always ask this question: how does it feel to be a Memphis Grizzlies fan in Memphis?
Man, great question. How about this? I'll tell you how I became a Grizzlies fan. So I was 9 years old in 2001 when the
Mhm.
team decided to move to Memphis, and I remember going with my family. They had this store where you could get a sign and you would put it in your yard, and it said NBA now. That was the slogan. We wanted the
Cool.
NBA now because Memphis didn't have a team. We had no professional teams at all.
Hmm.
And so it was so exciting the fact that maybe the Grizzlies were going to move to Memphis. And I remember the commercial appeal, the newspaper here in Memphis, when they printed on the front page, it said NBA yes. And it had grizzly bears crawling all over downtown Memphis, and it looked
Uh-huh.
so cool. And I just remember thinking, wow, like this. I'll tell you, my first thought was, wow, Michael Jordan is going to come play in Memphis. And I just thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
Um, and ever since then, I'll be honest, the first few years, it was hard being a Grizzlies fan because,
Hmm.
no one grew up a Grizzlies fan. They just got here. So
Yeah.
we're all trying to be Grizzlies fans, but nobody's really a Grizzlies fan. And Pau Gasol was the big star on the team, and they had some good seasons where they won 50 games and got to the playoffs, but they couldn't win a game. And I'll tell you, what changed everything was when they finally got Marc Gasol, Mike Conley, Zach Randolph, and Tony Allen.
Uh-huh.
Those guys, the way they played, they just embodied everything about Memphis. They worked
Grit and
hard
grind.
at grit and grind, man. Exactly. They worked hard for everything they had. None of them were superstars. Nothing was ever given to them. And that's exactly how people from Memphis feel. We have to work very hard. You know, we're not New York. We're not LA. We're not San Francisco. We're a pretty small town of hardworking people. And when those guys showed that on the basketball court, it then became cool to be a Grizzlies fan because they had been here for, 10 years at this point. We'd kind of grown up with them. And at that point, we said, all right, these guys are fun. These guys are winning games. These guys are playing some of the best teams in the NBA, and they're giving them fits. We love this stuff. And so I think from that then point on, man, it's been this is a Grizzlies town. Everyone loves the Grizzlies. We all go to the games. We all have watch parties if there's a playoff
Hmm.
game, and it's a ton of fun, man. I feel incredibly lucky to be here and to be a Grizzlies fan. So I think it's so cool. Like when you reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to be on the podcast, I immediately was like, yes. I think it is so cool because I just view Memphis as this small town in Tennessee, and there's people all across the world that enjoy watching the Grizzlies. So this was so much fun for me to do. I think that it's the coolest thing that there are people that don't live in this city that very much appreciate and like watching the Grizzlies as well.
Yeah, because that's the spirit. I tell you for myself. I can sense like the spirit. Like nothing is given for you. You have to work hard, and like I sense like this is like the Memphis spirit, and I totally identify with that. And so
That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So yeah, so yeah. I wish I was a Memphis Grizzlies fan in Memphis also too. So
Come visit someday, man. If you
I
do,
will.
just
No, no,
yeah, you
I,
send me a direct message on Twitter, and I'll buy you a beer or something like that. Anytime you're
okay.
in town, man, we'd love to.
I for sure will. And I have a lot of good people to meet her that I've been interacting with. And yeah, I DM you, you buy me a beer, I buy you two. Okay.
Deal, deal.
Okay, brother. It was such a pleasure to have you here. Um, I'm going to do a series of new podcasts up when the next season is upcoming. I want to already invite you. I'll of course DM you after. So you're already invited. It was really an honor, and it was such a great conversation to have with you, to have your takes. And okay, also, sorry. Um, you have this blog, NBA Draft. Do you want to let people know about it?
Yeah, NBA Draft blog. I don't write on it as much as I'd like to, but honestly, if you go to my Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it,
It's in
Chip
here.
Williams. Yeah, Chip
Yeah,
Williams Jr. Yeah, I love posting clips, talking about the Grizz, posting stats. Just I mostly talk about the Grizzlies on there. So if you're into the Grizzlies, I would love and appreciate the follow and love to chat anytime.
yeah,
This was a ton of fun, man. I can't thank you enough for having me on, and would love to do it again sometime.
yeah. For sure, we will. And again, it was my honor. Chip Williams, thank you so much for being here. So we'll be back soon. And if I go to Memphis prior, I'll certainly DM you. Okay.
Good,
Okay,
good
brother.
deal.
Okay. You have a wonderful afternoon. End of afternoon. No, it's almost it's evening there, right?
Yeah, evening
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
About dinner time now.
Okay. So have yourself a nice dinner and we catch up later. Okay.
sounds sounds good, man. Thank you again.
Okay. Thank you again. It was my honor to have you here, brother.
All right. Take care.